I wanted to entitle this, actually, there's no such thing as a virtual church. So there's a positive and a negative. But I want to explore and present a little bit about what's going on in the world around us that I'm sure we're all somewhat aware of, having to do with new technology. Focusing a little bit on social media, some of these new communication tools. Kurt already alluded to using Twitter, so we'll talk a little bit about Twitter as well. And ask a question, well, what does this mean for the church? How can we approach this new reality in our world, and how can we use these tools, and what does it mean? So don't think that this graphic represents, these tools being below or above a church. This is really the church illuminating your iPhone there and your different applications that may come on an iPhone as one example. So I'll start with this. What happens in an internet minute? I know you can't read this from where you are, but just for a little bit of fun, it's hard to get your mind around what goes on and the amount of information that's flying around. So I'll just look at a couple of these. In 1 minute on the internet, 6 new Wikipedia articles are published. How many are familiar with Wikipedia? Okay, sure. Amazon does, I think it's 83,000 in sales in 1 minute online. There are 1,300 new mobile users. Some of you, I'm sure, are mobile users connecting to the internet. We'll talk a little bit about that. If not, I may explain some things that you're already very familiar with, just because some people may not, be as familiar with them, and I think it's fun and important just to explore and explain some of those things. On Google, 2 million search queries in 1 minute. Now, many of you know Google as the most popular search engine online. Does anybody know what number 2 is, the number 2 most popular search engine? Yahoo, Bing. Actually, no, number 2 is YouTube, which is owned by Google. So if you're concerned about privacy, which we probably should be as concerned citizens in any time, think about Google. I'm not going to get into that today, but think about that. And then at the very bottom here, the future. Today, number of network devices equals the global population. By 2015, the number of network devices 2 times the global population. So it exponentially is growing. And because of our internet searching addiction, there's a study that came out, this is a little while ago, it said that our attention span is now about 9 seconds, about that of a goldfish. Which means I'm out of my time already. Actually, what it means, I know Father James last night, I don't mean to pick on him if he's still here, he grabbed an extra 15 minutes. I will not be trying to grab an extra 15 minutes, so. Okay, so let's step back a minute from the internet minute and just look at a day in the life of the internet, just to get context here, okay? So in one day, let's see, enough information is consumed by internet traffic to fill 168 million DVDs. So this is an infographic I found on techrepublic.com, which is a fun site to visit. It tries to kind of quantify these. It's still, you can't get your mind around it, but it tries to give you a visual for what that would be like. 294 billion emails are sent. So this would take 2 years for our United States Postal Service to process that amount of mail in one day. 2 million blog posts are written and added to the World Wide Web that you can go look up and find anytime. How many bloggers in the room? Anybody doing any blogging? Good, a couple bloggers. So if that's enough to fill, there it is, enough to fill Time magazine for 770 years in one day. 250 million photos are uploaded to Facebook. We're going to talk a little bit more about Facebook. Actually, I got an extra one here. 172 million different people visit Facebook in a day. It's got Twitter listed there, 40 million, some others. 4.7 billion minutes are spent on Facebook. So where are people spending their time today? And then just a note here about 532 million statuses are updated on Facebook. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, so 250 million photos. If printed, the stack would be as tall as 80 Eiffel Towers. 1,288 new apps to download. Okay, and more than 35 million apps are downloaded. We're going to talk a little bit about apps too, just to kind of get into that. But it's incredible the amount of growth and available information that's being added every single day, and indeed every single minute, for people to go and access and spend their time. And then finally, today, iPhone sales outpace the growth of the human population. So in every day, I'm going to skip this one. There's too many. I'm not trying to take an extra 15. I'm trying to scale back. So today, iPhone sales outpace the human population. So that means when you have a child, you can immediately give them an iPhone, right? So this brings us to kind of what goes hand in hand with this internet phenomenon that we have that is causing us to lose our attention span, and that is what's called a smartphone. How many of you have a smartphone? Okay, many of you do. So it's usually either an Android or an iPhone. I have an Android. My wife has an iPhone. I know I'm in Canada, but research in motion is. Are they in motion? I'm sorry. You said go Red Wings, so I'm all right. I'm all right. Or a BlackBerry, yes, there are, and there's Windows-enabled phones and all that kind of stuff. But the term phone at this point, smartphone, is a complete misnomer. It's not. I mean, if you had to rank most people who use a smartphone, if you had to rank what you use it for by importance, phone would end up kind of down the list. I mean, they're still used as phones, but really not the main use anymore. They're a camera, a calendar. They have a ton of apps. I'll talk a little bit about some apps in a minute. Your contacts, who you keep in touch with, how you keep in touch with them. Literally your whole life, people's whole lives, they're just attached to this thing. Music, entertainment, you can watch movies on them. It's incredible. So we take these things everywhere we go. One quick story about that, and I'm going to relate all this, of course, to our life as church and in your parish, and hopefully as individuals too, for some things to think about. But my wife and I moved into a new house about 5 years ago, and we invited a young priest over after a year or two. We finally got him over. We wanted to do a house blessing, and it was great. We had dinner, got caught up with our friend, this young priest, and we asked him to do the house blessing. He said, no problem. Went in his car looking for his prayer book. Oh, I got to find the right prayers, right? Well, he couldn't find it. No problem. Pulls out his iPhone, has the prayers in like 2 minutes, And I'm going, why didn't he just do that first, So they're used for all kinds of things. And that was just one way that it keeps hitting me in the face. Wow, these things really are taking over a lot of our everyday experiences. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the mobile market. I'm not saying smartphone, I'm talking about all mobile phones here. And today, about 4 billion mobile phones in use today, so over half the planet. And 3/4 of those, so about 3 billion out of 4 billion, are at least SMS enabled, which means they can text. In fact, we have a friend who's a missionary in a third world country, and he explained that people who have mobile phones there, all they use them for is texting. They pay a little bit of money. Whenever they get some money, they prepay, and they can text. So it's a communication device all over the world. And then, of course, about 1/4 of them are smartphones, or what I like to call pocket computers, and they have access to the full power of the internet right in your pocket. By 2014, mobile internet should take over desktop internet use. So that's a couple short years. As the sales continue to go up for these mobile devices, the use of computing power and connecting to the internet, there'll be more of that done on these mobile phones than on desktop computers. So what are people doing? Pardon me, it's after lunch. They give the dude from Michigan the after lunch part. Try to keep you awake after your nice meal. So one quick example, so why so much more internet usage on a mobile phone than on desktop? Well, there's a stat, the people that use their mobile phones are using them more for social connection. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about Facebook and Twitter and some of these things that people are doing all day long. Than people who are sitting at a desk at a computer are less using those desktop computers for social interaction, less. So the more the mobile use continues to grow, the more the social media continues to grow as well. So how are they being used? We talked about text messaging. That's definitely number one. I mean, all over the world. Emailing, pretty common, and social networking. So, and I like this iPhone because it's got a lot more space to do stuff on. But So where are these smartphones being used? So if we look up here, work, that's great. People are working. Outdoor activities, you can take them anywhere, to the bar. If you can't read some of these, going down. In the bathroom, 75% in the bathroom. I won't ask for a show of hands. Family dinner table. But look, keep on going down. Look here at the bottom. These are being used in church. So what that means is, yes, Father, they're texting during the homily, playing Angry Birds probably, things like that. Doesn't keep them out of church, right? So on average, and this is a stat for Americans, spend 2.7 hours per day socializing on their mobile device. So really what they're probably doing in church is socializing, texting, Facebook, that kind of thing. So, or they could be, yes, they could be reading their missal on their phone. Show of hands. Oh, that's a lot. That's the most of you. Okay, so that's over twice the amount of time they spend eating, and over a third of the time they spend sleeping each day is using this device for socializing. So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. You take these things everywhere. In fact, I'm beginning to believe that we can't really turn them off. We're starting to, this is how we operate. I know there are days, any of you who have these mobile devices and use them heavily, there are probably days where you want to take it and throw it into the ocean. This is partly as I sat down and tried to think about how I would share about technology and ministry and engagement, I had a personal reflection too of, can I really turn this thing off? How much does it own what I do, and how much do I own what I do with it? And I think that's a question that as individuals we should be asking and trying to keep a correct relationship. So that's part of the story. Okay, so let's talk about apps. So apps really are, we already had one example here, the iMissal. And on the left-hand side at the top, you see this is the confession app. Anybody heard of the confession app? Okay, this is actually a real app. I think it's an iPhone app. I don't have an iPhone, so snobs. App is really, if you think of a software program like Microsoft Office, it's this big powerful thing with all these features and functions, and you get this thing and put it on your computer, you can do 1,000 different things with it. It's kind of an all-in-one thing for whatever you're trying to do, encompassing a lot of different applications. So your Microsoft Word would be an application. In this case, what apps have become, really short for applications, is a very full, focused, and curated piece of software for a specific thing. And so there are thousands, and I had some stats earlier, thousands and thousands of apps out there. Anybody can create apps on these different platforms. So it's kind of opened up the world of software development to anyone and everyone who sees a need for doing a particular purpose. So we have some apps up here. The one in the middle is YouTube. So on your smartphone, you can get any YouTube, actually from your iPhone. Of course, we're big Red Wings fans, so we have the NHL app and some others here. Okay, so I think what I want to do here is talk a little bit about how cool this is. I think it's cool. Some of you think it's cool because I know you're using these things. Well, one example I thought of how it really helps people to connect and share is with an iPhone app that my wife has on her phone that our little niece Avery uses. Avery is, pardon me, she's in chemo right now because she has a brain tumor and she had surgery, and she's going through this really intense medical season. And because of that, her cousins, our kids, can't go visit her because of the medicine, right? And they have a cousins club where they get together a couple times a year, and these kids know each other, they love each other. Well, there's an app on the iPhone called Draw Something. It's basically Pictionary. So on the iPhone, Avery can draw a picture, and this is one from Avery, and then our kids get the picture on our phone and go, oh, Avery drew something, and they can try to guess what it is, and then their turn to draw a picture. So in talking and spending a little time with them about their experience of going through this medical problem, one of the things that they've shared with us is that for Avery and for their families, some of these technology tools have become literally a lifeline for them because other kids can't come, like I said, and visit. But it really does, in a way, keep them connected to each other in a personal way. Now, I don't think that connection would be the same, obviously, if they didn't know each other personally. But some of these things are just tremendously great tools that can be used to help people connect and stay in touch. So that's a very good, I believe, use of some of these mobile applications, along with Father Chaz doing the prayers in our house and using the iMissal and things like that. Okay, so back to our apps here, and I just want to actually focus for a little bit more on a couple social media icons here. How many of you heard of Facebook and Twitter? Okay, most of you have heard of them. How many of you are actually on Facebook? Okay, about half. How many use Twitter on a regular basis? I know Kurt does. I appreciate that. I'm going to follow, so. Okay, so if you're not familiar, I'll just explain briefly. Facebook is basically a website where you set up your own personal profile, tell a little bit about yourself, and then you connect through Facebook to other people anywhere in the world online, and you ask them to become friends with you. And if they say yes, then now you're friends, and everything that you say on Facebook, if you type a little status or you post a picture of your family or you send a message out, they will be able to see that and keep up with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is pretty cool. I'd say the biggest thing that Facebook is used for today, and you can maybe disagree with me, but is pictures. People post a lot of pictures on Facebook, particularly families, kids, all that kind of stuff. And even with our friends, people who are across town that we're very good friends with, we keep up with what's going on in their life a little bit by what's going on Facebook. Okay? So today, as of August of this year, it's projected that Facebook will have 1 billion active users. So they actually measure active users. It's being logged in at least once a month. And here in Canada, 53% of the population is on Facebook. So about half of you raised your hand. That's about the correct proportion there. In the US, this is about 50%. So you're a little ahead of us there in the US. Okay, and now what about Twitter? Twitter, I like to describe it as glorified texting. The reason is, with Twitter, and Kurt gave a great example, he's tweeting out these messages that are pertinent to the subject matter that you're thinking about every day. And they have to be 140 characters long or less. So you really have to keep it within a limit. That you're not allowed to send out a message on Twitter. And Twitter's a little different. You don't have friends, you have followers. Note the sort of religious connotation there. How many followers do you have? Okay. So not only can people follow you, but you can follow them. So now when you text out, and of course in your text you can include a link to a website or include a picture or an audio file or anything like that. So you can include a lot more information than you can contain in 140 characters. But it really is a very short communication that goes out to everyone who's following you. And then if you see something from one of your followers, so you can follow celebrities, you can follow the Pope. I'll talk about that in a little bit. You can follow Kurt. You get something that you like, you can retweet that. It's called retweet to all of your followers. So think about this. You had a thought, and it's a profound thought one day, and you say, well, I got to tweet this out to my followers. You tweet it out to your 10 followers. They tweet it out to their 10 followers, and they tweet it out to their 10 followers. I mean, within minutes, you could you could trend. You could be trending worldwide. You, personally. That's the allure of Twitter. So they do actually track trending, and you can see what's trending at the moment, worldwide. What are people talking about on Twitter instantly? So today there's about 500 million users on Twitter. I think this number is actually a little high in terms of active users. It's probably more like half that, but still, it's very, very popular. Anybody care to wager a guess on who the number one person on Twitter is with the most followers today? Say that again? Justin Bieber, great guess, but incorrect. But that is a great guess. Ashton Kutcher, I'm hearing a lot of celebrities. It's actually Lady Gaga. So you're right on target. I wouldn't have got this either. I had to look it up. Although I love her music. No, I'm just... Lady Gaga has about 26 million followers on Twitter. Now contrast that a little bit with, I did look up some other people on Twitter. There's a Vatican News site that's pretty popular. It's pretty new though. Has about 87,000 followers at this point. And certainly any celebrity you want, you could find on Twitter. So, all right, a couple quick notes about these two social medium, I'll call them apps, but really it's a phenomenon. Years it took to reach a market audience of 50 million. So this is not even how many people are on these things, but how fast does this grow? How quickly does this multiply? So for radio, how long do you think it took to reach a market audience of 50 million? About 38 years. For TV to reach the same level, about 13 years. For the internet itself to reach a market audience of 50 million, it took 4 years. For Facebook, it took 2 years. And now we're at 1 billion, and it's continuing to grow. And then for Twitter, it took Twitter 3 years, 2 months, and 1 day to reach 1 billion tweets total. And today, 1 billion tweets a week. A lot of birds flying around out there. Okay, so what does this all mean to you, right? I just saw this guy in Halifax yesterday. Isn't this just for, young hipsters? Isn't this mobile technology, social media stuff just for young hipsters? There's another thing I came across here, that women aged 35 to 54 are actually the most active group in mobile socialization. So they're not the largest group, but they're the most active. Why is that? I don't know the answer, so maybe it's because women in that age group, they've actually maybe given up a measure of their social life to raise a family. They're now having kids. Maybe they don't work as much. So this is a great way for them to keep connected and in touch and how they share their life. Maybe women just like to talk more. I said maybe. I don't have any research to. My wife did tell me not to say that. More interested maybe in sharing pictures. I mean, this is all anecdotal, but my experience is, maybe that's some of it. But that is an interesting stat, though. It's not just young kids, it's not just teenagers, not just college kids, but there are, and certainly with the ability now to Skype with people across the world, so there's plenty of stories I've heard of, grandparents Skyping with their grandkids in California or wherever. The technology is available to everyone, and there are a lot of different people using it. Okay, so what does this mean for the church? We try to answer this question here. This is why we're here. What do we do with all this? So I think there's a temptation here at a certain point to go, well, this is just the crazy world taking off. It has nothing to do with me. Or just be a little bit of afraid of the technology. Or I've sat through actually several presentations at different Catholic conferences where the conclusions that have been come to are, well, we're kind of stuck with this, so let's just try to do something with it, right? So I actually want to offer a couple of examples and give some thoughts on why this is a good thing, and then give the opposing view as well on the no such thing as a virtual church. For one way to think about this is that now these apps, these tools that are available to everyone are focused and curated, meaning people choose and access what information they want at any time, and they can access it very quickly. And curated meaning with things like these social apps, there are all different aspects of how they're used. So they can combine video, audio, news, location, navigation sharing, calendars and notes and everything into one application for a specific purpose. So think about that for the church. This is really a communication tool in some ways. If you want to get a message out or if you want to share something, this is a way to do it. And then I try to relate this as well to what we've been talking about with new evangelization. Some of these quotes have already been used, but Archbishop Mancini quoted this in his pastoral letter. But to me, it just jumped off the page. So the emphasis is mine here, but a new evangelization, new in art or methods and expression, I think it's maybe a little more surface level than what we were talking about earlier with behavior and belonging. But there's definitely new methods of expression here that the world is choosing, that people are using every day. So where is the church in all this? And then John Paul II, again, quoted in the pastoral letter, but this is John Paul II who said, "The courage to forge new paths in responsibility to the changing circumstances and conditions in the church and are called to proclaim and live the gospel today." So historically, we as a church have always tried to proclaim the gospel in every way we could. And this is just a new way. And I'll give some examples of what I think about that. In some ways, Father James last night talked about the make disciples as being the most important part of that mission. Maybe this is just part of the go, right? It used to be go now to all these different countries and lands, which we still do. But now there's a new sort of go here. We need to go into this new sort of land we don't quite know and understand yet and be there, because that's what we're supposed to do. Pope Benedict XVI said this in 2010 at World Communications Day: "The increased availability of new technologies demands greater responsibility on the part of those called to proclaim the word, but it also requires them to become more focused, efficient, and compelling in their efforts." So we should ask ourselves, how are we as church, maybe it's in the parish, something that the parish does, or as individuals, how are we using these to be more focused, efficient, and compelling in our efforts? And this is a pretty big challenge. Think about what St. Paul might do. Where are people congregating? I mean, that's where he would go. Where people are is where you go. And this is where people are congregating today. Okay, so I have an example here. This Lent, anybody seen Pope Benedict on Twitter? No one yet? A few? Okay, a few on your BlackBerry. That's cool if you're into that sort of thing. So I found this was pretty cool. I actually I'll admit I didn't find it until after I started thinking about this, but he decided that he'd tweet every day throughout the 40 days a Lenten message. And the quote in this little article that kind of stuck out to me, which was sort of a little bit profound, is at the bottom here, which talks about Twitter as something that's in concise phrases, often no longer than a verse from the Bible. Profound thoughts can be communicated. It's true. Yep. So this is a tool that, of course, I went to the top here. I went right for the Pope. But there's a lot of different, there's great people like Kurt already mentioned, but there's great people you can find on Twitter and follow and, be a part of that experience every day. All right, let's talk about Facebook for a second. This is a church outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and they have a Facebook profile. So individual organizations, churches are using this so that their parishioners or people who are interested in what they have to say and what's going on can come over to their Facebook profile and like the church. I like the church, so I'm going to click on this little button, right? So this church actually has about 1,000 people that like it, which is pretty good. And it's very simple. They use this, they post their upcoming events, they post pictures of people smiling at their events. They post reminders. And they also have a nice little touch here. You can't really see it. Maybe you can join my list at the right-hand side, the little checker part. So if you want to join their email list, you can click on that, put in your email address, and they actually do nice email newsletters. I'm not going to talk a lot about that today, but it's another great tool that we should be using is nice email newsletters. So this is a really nice way to take advantage of this new technology and be out there, and it's very simple to do. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, but it's free. It doesn't cost anything. So again, I'm quoting at this point Archbishop Mancini when he said in the letter, to be the Catholic Church here and now, to proclaim the gospel with effect and credibility. I think these tools help us do that. It's one way. And I love this quote. It just jumped out at me as well, so I'm going to share it as from the pastoral letter last year, where it said, become known for who you are and not necessarily what you are against, but who you are. What's one great way to become known for who you are today? Well, to have a website. It's not the only way, and it's certainly to become known for who you are requires a personal connection in a lot of ways, but there are people that are looking, and if they find you, likely this is where they're going to find you. So this website here, I just pulled one. It's a school website. There are very simple ways to have a very nice website that just basically communicates who you are and just a little bit of information about what the church is about. I think it's important that we do that. I think historically as well, the church has had two main channels for communication. The bulletin, you have bulletins? Oh yeah, love the bulletin. And the pulpit. Two great channels. Now I'm sure some of you have additional ones, but this is just another channel. Think of it that way. The social media is just another channel, and these continue to grow. So jumping in and being a part of it. Okay. Anybody familiar with The Atlantic? It's a publication. I'm going to disclaim here, I'm not like a huge fan of The Atlantic or something. I do read their articles from time to time because they're interesting. But their cover story of this issue for this month is called, "Is Facebook Making Us Lonely?" It was very intriguing to me. It's a great article. I don't necessarily, and I don't think the author even answers the question, yes, Facebook is making us lonely. But it's an interesting read about what this phenomenon does to personal relationships, to people. And I was so interested in it, I figured I'd share a little bit of it with you here today. The little description of the article says this: social media, from Facebook to Twitter, have made us more densely networked than ever. Yet for all this connectivity, new research suggests that we have never been lonelier or more narcissistic, and that this loneliness is making us mentally and physically ill. So this is a report on what the epidemic of loneliness is doing to our souls and to our society. That sounds pretty dramatic, right? Of course, they're trying to sell magazines, but it is an interesting question. Over the past 3 decades, technology has delivered us to a world in which we need not be out of contact for a fraction of a moment. Isn't that true after looking at all this? I mean, that's really what it is. We have never been more detached from one another or lonelier. In a world consumed by ever more novel modes of socializing, we have less and less actual society. I would agree with that as well, in some ways. And I think that's what we've been talking about here in trying to revitalize and engage parish life. So we live in an accelerating contradiction. The more connected we become, the lonelier we are. Now he goes through and tries to prove this through some research. You have to read the article and make your own conclusion. One interesting thing about this article is that he kind of nails it at a certain point. I think he nails it when he talks about a book written by a man named Robert Putnam. The book is called Bowling Alone, attributed the dramatic post-war decline of social capital, the strength and value of interpersonal networks, parishes maybe, numerous interconnected trends in our life, suburban sprawl, television, media dominance over culture, and then the disintegration of the family. So I think what we can say is Facebook making us lonely? Not necessarily, but is it where people are? Yes. So I think he kind of nails early on in the article, there are a lot of things going on in society that are pulling people away from each other and not really necessarily conducive to church or parish life where people really live in community, which is what was talked about in several of the previous presentations. So I'll just kind of summarize, and my point here is that this really is just a tool. And there's another guy who wrote a book about loneliness, and he said Facebook can be terrific if we use it properly. So maybe think about it as an individual if you're on Facebook. It's like a car. You can drive it to pick up your friends, or you can drive alone. But okay, so I won't go on any further than that because I'm not trying to grab an extra 15. But it's a very interesting article, and it came up as I was thinking about presenting this to you. And again, I think Facebook's a great tool, and I use that example of being on Facebook as a parish or person is perfectly all right. It's a tool, not good or bad, but look at what potentially it's doing, to people who are lonely. I mean, this is where they're living their life in more of a surface level, in some ways maybe narcissistic way. I think it was Archbishop who said, the Steve Jobs quote, they're living their life, I'm gonna miss it now, but don't waste your time living someone else's life. Got it. I think that's what can happen with people. They see all these friends. And by the way, I was on Facebook for a while. I'm not currently, but I'll probably go back sometime soon. I had like 600 friends, right? How many people did I actually care about? 15 at the most, But you see all this stuff coming in from all these different people. And it's really, what are they talking about a lot of times? Oh, this is the best stuff going on. This is my beautiful vacation to Hawaii, and So being authentic is a little bit difficult on some of these new media. Okay, so looking for love in all the wrong places, maybe that's the answer, right? And of course, I work for a technology company, so we like to look at the adoption life cycle. This could really be for any product, but I think maybe, and I won't go spend a lot of time on this, but you have your innovators. These are the people. How many of you are innovators? You're the first one. Something comes out, you're on it. There's usually a small group. Nobody here? Okay. There's one. Okay, we got an innovator. That's about right. And then you have your early adopters. After it's kind of been tested a little bit, you hear a little bit of feedback. Now you have your early adopters. Any early adopters here? All right, we're putting ourselves in these categories. This is great. Early majority, I think I'm early majority to late majority. I like to wait a little bit. And then finally, you have your laggards. This is my parents. That's okay, I love my parents. You can be laggards, that's all right. Okay, good, we have some laggards. Okay, so, what's interesting about this is I circled a point on the graph. I'm just totally guessing here, but I think with some of the social media stuff, you've seen the stats, you've seen how much it's grown. People have experienced this, and it hasn't necessarily given them the type of life that, they're hungry for something, right? So we may be on kind of the downswing with some of these tools that I'm talking about. Doesn't mean something isn't going to come along and replace them, and we need to be aware of that. But people will look for authentic community. They will look, some people may be looking now. Where are they going to look? Well, they're going to look where they always are, right, on their phones. And if they can find a connection, they may be interested. The interesting thing about Twitter, have you ever heard of something called tweet-ups? If you're on Twitter, you may have heard of these things. These are people that have been on Twitter for a while, and they have a number of followers, and they've kind of connected with these people they don't really know because they have common interests. They're tweeting about the same things. They've actually designed and set up a way that, hey, let's all meet in person. So it's kind of like you went the other way. We found each other on Twitter, now we're going to go get together and meet each other and shake hands, So it kind of works the other way as well. So it leads me to make a point here that I think is important. Really, technology cannot do certain things, just cannot. And I've listed a few, and I think these would tie in nicely with a lot of the other things been said here. Quick story about my son Joel. He's 5 now, but this is maybe a year or two ago. He really loves his Nintendo Wii. Does anybody have a Wii? They're fun. I like them too. So you hold the thing, and then you can play games. And he got into the bowling game. He loves all sports, but yeah, bowling, yeah, good, bowling fan. So he played bowling Wii whenever we'd let him. And whenever we weren't letting him, he would beg to play the Wii. But so he got pretty good at it. At one point, his grandma, Monica's mom, brought home a lawn bowling set. It was actual pins and a thing you could set on a ball. You could go outside and actually bowl. And it was cool. He liked it. And he kind of played with it for a little bit. And he started calling it his pretend Wii. So you can imagine, we took him to a real bowling alley. It was like he ended up in heaven. Whoa. It actually sounds, So that's the point. I mean, a lot of this social media stuff, great tools. We should be using them. I want to encourage the use of them. But in a sense, they're not the real thing. And actually, they are not the real thing. So my conclusion with a lot of this is the church doesn't need Facebook. Facebook needs the church. We need to be there. So that's my conclusion. You can do whatever you want with it. And so that leads to focus on some of the key elements as well of some of the things that have been talked about today. The gathering together, being together in the same place with actual people, actually talking to people, as most important. I noticed Archbishop Mancini focused on formation and teaching as well in the pastoral letter. So real life-changing, transformative teaching happens. There are a lot of online classes you can take, and they're great. But I think the real transformative teaching comes when you're in a classroom and you're with other people. And you can touch them and talk to them and actually have a relationship there in a dialogue. And of course, engaged dialogue. And I don't think you can really have truly engaged dialogue unless you are building engaged communities, which is what you're talking about. So all of this really is a supplement and a tool to help. And then, just to give a scriptural perspective, this verse came to my mind. Oops, did I miss it? Okay. This verse came to my mind as I was thinking about all this from John 21:6, where if you remember the story, the disciples are, this is after Jesus has died, they go out fishing, and I can almost imagine, they don't know what to do, they're not sure what's really happening. Maybe they got a little depressed, and they just say, let's go fishing. I'm going fishing. So they go out on their boat and they're fishing, and they're not catching anything, and the guy shows up on the shore and says, hey, just throw your net over the other side of the boat. And I kind of put myself in their shoes for a second. What is this craziness? Like, we're already fishing right here. This is where we're fishing. We're the fishermen here, But sure enough, they throw it over the other side of the boat, catch a huge catch, and that's when they realize it was Jesus. And Peter jumps out of the boat. Maybe some of these new tools are just one part of our net. And maybe all we need to do is just turn around, throw the net off the other side of the boat. I don't think one of the main things I wanted to share too is you don't need to be an expert. In fact, you don't become an expert on this by studying the social media stuff. You don't. You just do. You jump in. You do a little bit. Actually, studying it will probably not help you at all. Because once you learn it, it'll change a little bit. It's morphing and growing and evolving every day. So cast your net to the other side. So what if the church lived here? So what if we were, active on Facebook, promoting our communities, using this as a communication tool? What if you priests here, and even, of course, lay people and pastoral ministers got on Twitter, as part of your ministry? I've got some stuff here about YouTube. We didn't get into that today, but, you can have a YouTube channel. It's not expensive. It just takes some effort. You can... there's a lot of stuff on YouTube, a lot of not great stuff too. So let's get some good stuff there, And then using modern communication tools like email. I always mention it because I think we should. And in some ways, when I put this together, I was thinking, what would I say to my parish? If my parish asked me to come and talk about this, what would I say? I would say, start using email more. Give us a newsletter. It's cheap. Keep us informed. So, in some ways, when I encounter and talk to different parishes and people around the U.S. and we're working with some in Canada, there's this reluctance, to dive into this, and it's kind of like, well, I guess we have to do this. But I say, hey, we get to be here. This is what we get to do. This is the time that we live in. So we got to dive in. Okay, so final points here. Oh yeah, I'm gonna nail it. Okay, so just some kind of summarizing some of the things I've said. Hopefully this is helpful for you. So mobile communication and social media is a fantastic way to engage and serve parishioners and reach out to the community. I didn't make this point strong enough earlier, but I don't just think this is about evangelizing other people that aren't a part of our church. I think it's about serving your parishioners too. Think about it. You may say, well, I have an elderly population here or whatever. I guarantee you there's people that are on these social media, these networks every day. And if the church, if you showed up there, it would be a service to them. And some of you in the room are not, working at a parish, but you're in the church. We're talking about strengths and interests and building the church through engagement. If you have an interest in this stuff, the church might be able to use your skills, might be able to use your help, might be able to use your ideas. It's one way to be engaged in the life of the church. So it's an important way, I think. Okay, and then we talked about mobile devices being a communication portal. And finally, I say the church should have a website. I believe it. I think the church should have a good website. It actually does not take a big investment. I've listed 3 sites here. If you want to write them down, I'm sorry I don't have a handout. But if you're interested for your church to try to do some of this work, it's very inexpensive, of course, relatively speaking. But I mean, it's literally like $10 a month or something like that. And I don't get paid by these people, so this is not a... So, look them up. You can build a nice website. I know some of you actually looked around. Some of you do have some nice websites, which is great. But it's always nice to look at the new tools that are out there, see how you can improve them. Be known for who you are, put it out there. So there's 3 good examples. And then I think the church should have a social media presence. I really think we should be there for the reasons that we talked about, that I shared. And leverage, email tools and other communication tools. I really think we should be doing this as part of our net to try to bring people in. And the point is, keep it simple. Again, I think a lot of these tools, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You need to invest some time. You need to invest some effort, but it's not necessarily something that you need an expert for, okay? And then finally, just wrapping it up, focus all these things on the ultimate goal, which is engagement, which is what you're doing. These are tools to help. When the tools become the thing, you're missing out. And I think there are a lot of people out there that are missing out on what real community, real church is. And I've certainly felt that here, experiencing your conference, so I appreciate that. So that's what I had to present to you today on this topic, and I'll leave you with this. If Jesus were on Twitter, no, I'm not talking about Twitter. I literally want you to follow me.